All right, let's begin. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our session this evening, our session entitled Life of a Herbalist, Journey Towards Excellency. What we have planned for this session is that we'll be having 4 short talks. So we will have talks by Alex Jacobs, Helen Chunso, Charlie Buck, and myself, Connie Cooper. And what we're doing in those talks is really sharing our experience of training and working as herbalists. So we'll be giving you lots of good real life experience, real life information here for those of you who are interested, whether you would like to add herbal medicine to your acupuncture practice. We'll also be having a Q&A session at the end if you have any questions. Okay, so I'm going to start with our first short talk for the evening. My name is Connie Cooper. Until recently, I was the CEO of the Register of Chinese Herbal Medicine, and I'm on the EHDPA accreditation board, so the board that accredits our Chinese herbal medicine courses. I'm going to start talking a little bit about the training you can do to become a herbalist. And I'm going to kick off by giving you just a little bit of information about myself and how what kind of training I did. So I started as an acupuncturist initially. I qualified in acupuncture in 2006. And for many years, I ran a practice which was purely acupuncture. And it was a great practice, and I really enjoyed it. I was busy. I felt I was giving my patients something really valuable. The patients were grateful, were sending me referrals. So it was a really great thing to do. It was a great practice to have. I'd always also had the desire to practice herbs. So I decided to sign up on a course, and I did that 8 years later, and I graduated in 2015. And what I would say is that when I added herbs to my practice, something really changed. And while what I was doing before was really great, as I said, it was a great way of working. I felt that once I added the herbs, I was starting to work, I would say, in a deeper way, in a more profound way with the patients. I was able to do changes which I think I would not have been able to do with them using acupuncture only. And there may be other acupuncturists out there who would have been able to help their patients in that way. But certainly for me, I felt that there was something that was happening with the herbs particularly that really changed the way I was working. And because I realized that in the months after graduating with the herbs, there's a question that kept coming back to me. I kept asking myself, why did I wait such a long time? Why did I not practice earlier? Why did I not study herbs earlier? And there were reasons. For me, there were 3 reasons that stood out why I delayed and I waited a bit. The reasons were that I thought that studying herbs was very difficult, very complicated. I thought that studying herbs took a very long time. The courses were very long. And I also thought that it was very expensive to study herbs. So I'd like to address these points, and I'd like to really talk about them a little bit and give you my experience now that I've been through the process and I've been practicing a few years. I'd like to give you my thoughts on those topics because I think they're topics that come up quite regularly, and it'd be interesting for everybody to have that view. So the first question is learning herbs difficult? Is it a difficult thing? And certainly there's some aspects which are, I'll say, mentally stimulating. You do need to do a certain amount of memorizing herb names and formulas. But more importantly, I would say, there's also a lot of thinking to get your head around. So it's not just about learning the herbs, it's about really learning when to use them and how they need to be tweaked and understanding the dosages and how these need to be changed for the patient. So a certain amount of effort is required. But what I would also say is that the accredited courses that we have are very, very aware of this and very aware of how challenging it might be for the students at the beginning. And they make every effort to present the information at the right pace, in the right context, with plenty of support for the students, so that the students are really helped to digest the information and to truly understand it and use it. A big aspect of what we do with the accreditation is looking at student feedback. That means that the accreditation panels every year get feedback from the students and look at the feedback. And for every course, we make sure that actually the students are happy with how the information is presented. The students are satisfied with how they're taught. They're satisfied that they're processing the information well. They're confident when they graduate. So we get all this feedback from the students, and we make sure that, yes, the students are supported in that way and do feel in that way at the end of the course. So is learning herbs difficult? I would say It can be a little bit, but certainly the students are fully supported and given all the information in the right way to make the process as easy as possible. The second question is, does it take a long time to learn herbs? So, okay, yes, if we look at our accredited courses, they're usually 2-3 years long. And I think it does seem like, that's a certain length of time, but I do think that really is the time that is needed to process the information, because learning herbs is not just about cramming in herbs as quickly as possible, cramming in formulas and memorizing them, with some symptoms. The art of learning herbs is really about understanding how the formulas work and seeing them in different contexts and seeing them with different patients. And that's something that can't really be rushed. A big chunk of the length of the accredited courses is clinical experience. And that's such an important part of the learning. The idea that to really understand the herbs, you have to see them in clinical practice. You have to see real patients and you have to give the herbs to the real patients, see how the patients respond, and then decide, okay, how are we going to tweak the herbs? How are we going to change them? And then give a change formula to the patient. And again, they come back. And that whole process of really giving the herbs to somebody and seeing how their response is when everything comes to life and you really start to understand what the herbs actually do. So it does take a little bit of time, but it's, such a great time as well, such a fascinating part of the process to really see that in real life. That's when you really start to understand the power of the medicine and really how it works. Does it take time? It does take a bit of time, yes, but it's really worthwhile. The third question that I was asking, is it expensive to study herbs? And again, you would say, okay, yes, there is a certain cost associated with studying herbs. We do have course fees to pay. But the way I look at it now is that I don't think in terms of cost anymore. I think in terms of investment. So if I look at my own experience, for example, I studied on an accredited course and I paid the course fees. But I feel I had a really good training. I had plenty of clinical experience because that was a big part of what the course was about. When I graduated, I felt very confident to practice. And I think I had my first herbal patient 3 days after I've qualified and got my insurance. So certainly within the first week, I started writing my first formula. And I've been writing formulas ever since. I never looked back. And when I actually calculated the costs, I think that the money I earned from doing the herbs part of my practice, within 3 years, I had covered everything I had invested in the course in the first place, which means that after that, now a few years later, I'm earning money from herbs. It's a profit on the investment, if you like, if we're going to look at it in a financial way. So that is very much how I look at it now, in the sense of you're investing in something. And if you invest wisely, this is an investment that you will take with you for the rest of your life. And actually, you will be making a lot of money back from it for the whole rest of your professional life. So that is a question to ask yourself. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Now, you will notice in that what I've talked about here is only really about accredited courses. I've mentioned, the focus of the accreditation with the student experience, with a big clinical experience. The courses I'm talking about are the ones which are accredited by the EHTPA Accreditation Board, which is an independent board from the RCHM, so it's separate. The list of accredited courses is available on the RCHM website. If you go on the homepage, there's a button called For Practitioners, then there's a section called Getting Qualified, and in there, there's a link to training in Chinese herbal medicine. And what I will say here is that there are also other shorter courses available in the UK. And they say that they give you all the training that you need to practice herbs. So I'd like to also say a few words about those. And it's not about pointing my finger at any particular short course. It's just about giving general information for people to think about. We're all acupuncturists, so I would say we're all familiar with the situation where we have physiotherapists or osteopaths who can do very short courses. Sometimes they do just a few weekends, and then they call themselves acupuncturists. And actually, in some circle, these people are actually considered, the authorities on acupuncture above and beyond people who've done the full BAB accredited training in acupuncture. And there's a little bit of a parallel here with what's happening in the field of Chinese herbal medicine. So these shorter courses, which claim that they give you all the information you need to call yourself a herbalist, what I would say is that in my experience, that is not the case. In my experience, there is a major issue with those courses, particularly because they don't have to have a clinical aspect. And you can have the best and the most experienced teachers if what they give you is theoretical information about herbs and formulas, and then they read out a few case studies, for example. I would say that's not actually teaching herbs, because as I've mentioned, I think the most important aspect of learning herbs is the clinical aspect. It's actually giving them, it's actually tweaking your formula, really tailoring your formula to the patient, seeing how they respond and changing it. That is the process when you actually truly start to learn and start to gain confidence in doing it. And invariably, that's the part that's missing from the shorter courses, because that's the part that's actually difficult to organize. So without this, it's very difficult to become a confident, effective herbalist, I would say. What's happened at the RCHM over the last few years is that we have had a number of graduates from shorter courses who have contacted us saying that they finished the course and they know some theory, but they don't really feel they know enough, and they're certainly not confident to practice it. They don't feel able to start. And what should they do? And I would say that's actually a really, really sad situation, because here we have practitioners who had all the interest, who had the desire, who committed to a course in good faith because they were told by the course, this is all the information you need. And yet, they go onto the course and then they finish a course and they feel actually they're stuck and they're not actually able to practice. So what looked like a really good deal to them initially ends up being a little bit of a waste of time and money for them, because very sadly, it's not taking them anywhere. And chances are a lot of them will not actually become herbalists. And that's such a shame as well, because I think these are people that really wanted to do it and wanted to prescribe herbs to their patients for the rest of their life. And that's been cut short for them. You don't need to take my word for it, because you may say, oh, Connie's on the HTPA accreditation board, she's biased. Don't take my word for it. My advice would be that if you're considering studying on a particular course, speak to some graduates of the course. Speak to them and find out for yourself what it's actually like to be on the course. So we can certainly put you in touch with our graduates from our HTPA accredited courses, or for any other course you're considering. Go online, find the graduates, get them on the phone and have a chat with them and see what, what it really is like to study on a particular course. I think that's a really important step if you're considering going down that route. Okay, so I feel I've just thrown out a whole bunch of information here, a whole lot of things to think about. As I said, we have the Q&A at the end. I'm very happy to answer any other questions you have, or I'm also very happy at any point in future for people to contact me and have a chat or ask me any questions, and I'll be very happy to answer. But that's the end of my section right now. So I'm going to pass on the microphone to Alex Jacobs, who's the RCHM president, and we'll be talking about the role of the RCHM, what the RCHM offers. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. Hi, everybody. As Connie says, I'm the RCHM president. Worked closely with Connie over the last 3 years, but we've known each other for quite a while. In fact, we work out at the same clinic, or I work out of Connie's clinic. It's actually one of the really nice things about working, together with other herbalists is one of the things that I've had a really great experience with the RCHM. As Connie said, it sounds like we're speaking as, people who run the RCHM, but we're primarily herbalists, and we're primarily Chinese medicine practitioners. And I think, when it comes to, just to echo what Connie said, when it comes to choosing a course, it's not really about long or short. It's just what we're trying to do is just to put out as much good information out there so people feel like they're really informed about the best choice of a course, really. So yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about my journey after graduation as a herbalist, and journey particularly through the RCHM, because it was a bit of an unexpected path for me. I trained as a herbalist, that's what I wanted to do. And I over the years, I actually got more and more involved in the RCHM. I got to see a lot of what it does, and so I was going to share some of my experiences with that. As I said, when I joined the RCHM, I didn't really know much about it. I thought I'd just join it because I was a British Acupuncture Council member, and it felt like a pretty equivalent organization. Both organizations seemed to hold the same kind of values, so it just seemed like a logical choice. It was when I went to my first conference in 2013 that I started to realize that there's actually something quite special about this organization. At that conference, I was lucky enough to meet Mazen Al-Kufaji, and he gave me some nice words of encouragement. And this really set the tone for my journey within the organization. That I think, as you know, in the BXC, that you can have a really amazing supportive community. And if you speak to anyone in the RCHM, how they feel about the other RCHM members, how they feel about the organization itself, you'll feel you'll get quite positive response. One of the reasons is that we've had some really dedicated, fantastic people over the years who've put an enormous amount of effort to build something that we all benefit from now. So I want to give you a little bit of a window into what that thing is. And by the way, it's not just RCHM members that benefit from it. It's actually the whole field of Chinese herbal medicine, if not herbal medicine itself. Back then, 2013, the president was a lady called Emma Farrand, and her and a very prominent member, Michael McIntyre, were spending a lot of time and energy and skill liaising with all levels of government, establishing connections with key organizations relating to practice. There are other members such as Tony Harrison and Tony Booker, who had very deep understanding of the science of plants and medicines. And we're kind of keeping a keen eye on issues of herbal supply and safety, things like that. We had academics and we still have academics like Trina Wood, Andrew Flower, Trevor Wing, Sarah Price, Volker Scheid, all doing high-level research, having a great impact on the national conversation, and also creating research opportunities for other researchers. They've all brought other PhD students up the process, but also created opportunities for current research, most notably recently Andrew Flower and the Jade Screen Project. So all of this, seeing what came before me, really got me inspired to get involved and help out where I could. And I kind of fell into organizing the conference, which I did for 8 years. Amazing opportunity. And through all those connections that the RCHM had, I got to be part of this effort to connect up all these great members and great prominent members to the whole membership. And within these conferences and CPD opportunities, which actually created other kinds of opportunities, there was an incredible interaction, not only between the speakers and each other, but also the speakers and our community, creating more opportunities as we went. One of these opportunities, for example, is that the organization over the years got very friendly and built really great connections to the Chinese Medical University in Taichung in Taiwan. This is the main Chinese medical university in Taiwan, and it's run by one of the most prominent the most prominent Chinese medicine clinical researcher in Taiwan, but he's also one of the main clinical researchers in the world, the kind of output of quality research that they make. He's also a great practitioner, and he's the current dean now of the Chinese Medical University. So there's all these opportunities that are opening up over there with exchange programs and things like that. And one of the things that we're able to do with the conference is to connect people up to this kind of to the most exciting areas in the world of the future vision of Chinese medicine, Chinese herbal medicine. And really show a model for what can be achieved, because great things have been achieved around the world. And but also, interestingly, people look to the work that the RCHM's done globally and learn from us, because even though the big ticket item of statutory regulation didn't happen, what a lot of people don't know is quite how much was achieved and was maintained over time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. When I joined the organization, I had literally zero interest in anything related to regulation or government policy or the legal aspects or all of these things. I just wanted to be a Chinese herbalist. I still do. That's still the main thing that fires me up. But after spending a few years, particularly in the president role, I realized that there's a lot of these issues which they're live issues. They're things that are happening and decisions that we have to make all the time. And we're supported by this incredible network of experts who are some of the most credible people that I've met within the field of Chinese medicine. I remember in one of the conferences I organized, I invited a friend of mine. He's a Western doctor. He's a geriatric specialist consultant, and he came along. And my first instinct was, oh, I hope he speaks to the right people in the room so he doesn't get a bad impression of the medicine. And then I looked around the room and I realized he could speak to anyone in this room and come away with an incredible impression. And I think this just speaks to this real desire for everyone to lift each other up. And that's something that has definitely been my experience. And I think that everyone else on the panel would agree with that today. But as I said, but having been president now, I realize that there's a number of things that the RCHM does, which really creates this great environment for everybody. The RCHM is really the leading voluntary regulating body in Chinese herbal medicine in the UK. And when you compare the things that the RCHM does with any other bodies, we're really doing so much more. Because of the efforts that we make, and we'll go through some of those in a moment, the government bodies like MHRA and DHSC directly communicate with us and with the EHTPA, which is a kind of our umbrella body. Because of that, they view us very favorably, but we also have this two-way communication where we get to understand their priorities too. So from a legal perspective, the law of Chinese herbal medicine, it provides for legal practice. So it's legal to practice Chinese herbal medicine in the UK, but it's always been implicitly tied from the beginning to the idea that there would be good, responsible voluntary regulators. There's a little difference between Chinese herbal medicine and acupuncture, that in that the government has to talk to the Chinese herbal medicine industry. They haven't got a choice because, yes, they don't regulate practitioners specifically, but they regulate medicines. So herbal medicines are considered medicines. There is provision in law for us to give them to patients, but the government has to act constantly, particularly the MHRA. For that reason, they need to communicate with somewhere, and really they can only communicate with people who hold the standards, because and responsible people who can speak their language, and that's basically us and the EHTPA. As I say, it's legal to practice and it's very, very safe. However, there are occasional court cases, and the most significant past legal ruling concerning a Chinese herbal practitioner who was taken to court, it was very clear that it was outlined by the judge that a practitioner is expected to have taken reasonable safety precautions in the line of practice. And that's very much defined within the standard within the art, the standard that's really set by the higher standard voluntary regulators like us. So basically, as a herbalist, you have to really show that you've been practicing at a reasonable level of care. And by being an RCHM member, almost automatically, you're entering in at that level. So of course, we've talked about the accredited colleges, the minimum standards of training, which go to prove that as well. But I'm just going to bring up a little PowerPoint just to show you the different aspects of it. So let me just share my screen here. Okay. And 1 second. Okay. There we go. So this is us in the middle here, Register of Chinese Herbal Medicine. And as I mentioned, there's the EHTPA as well, which is the European Herbal and Traditional Medicine Practitioners Association. This is kind of umbrella body, multiple different herbal traditions, and we all come together to maintain standards. And then the EHTPA will liaise directly with the MHRA and DHSC and all those government bodies. Now, myself and another member of the RCHM Council sit on the HTPA. So the HTPA is us. So within this kind of higher standards voluntary regulation, as I say, one of the main things that we can show the government is that we have minimum standards of training, which goes a hugely long way. We also run a scheme where we independently audit herbal suppliers, and they have to pass those audits to demonstrate that they have a certain level of safety. This is so the RCHM is the only body that does this for Chinese herbal medicine. So it's the only body that a member can say that the herbs that they're giving you have gone through some kinds of checks. This also, as I say, is very much appreciated by the MHRA. In many ways, we're doing their job, and they're very grateful for that. And on top of this, we also have a huge amount of resources and an ongoing continuing professional development to support our members. So we have CPD lectures on things like toxicology and herb safety, and how to respond to and recognize things like adverse reactions. But we also have a journal, we have a conference, we have a CPD program. We have the Bristol Chinese Herb Garden, where you can go and see the herbs being grown. And that's affiliated with the University of Bristol, where we also have a whole pile more connections in there. We pay for twice yearly safety research summaries, which basically keep us up to date with the latest issues within herbal safety. And of course, because we liaised with the MHRA, the DHSC, we have a member on the Herbal Medicines Advisory Committee. It's a government advisory committee. And we liaise with lots of other related organizations like Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew. So many people might not know that Kew is one of the global leaders in plant sustainability. A lot of people know about endangered species of animals, but they don't know that there's very big issues within sustainability of plants too. So the RCHM is involved in all of these things. We have these connections to global institutions. There's the logo for Taiwan's China Medical University. We have links with Swiss clinic within a Chinese medicine university. And we also then connect up with a whole pile of other complementary advocacy groups, the Herbal Alliance, which is a much wider band of different herbal medicine traditions, which helps us to promote and get our message out, but also other bodies that are trying to promote complementary medicine across the board. And by connecting up with all these different organizations, we're able to push things forward. And of course, we have all these academics who are on our membership list, but also we have connections into those universities, most notably University of Southampton, Westminster, also Bristol. So with all of these different aspects of the RCHM works, a lot of these things I had absolutely no idea about as a new member, and I've grown to understand the importance of. What that means is as a member of the RCHM, you are not only protected in yourself, so when it comes to the potential of any kind of legal issue, which is rare, but it happens, you are in much better standing than if you are outside of this group, because of all the efforts the RCHM does on your behalf, but also helps you to practice in a way that really meets high standards. So there's not only is it good for you, of course, it's good for your patients too, because your patients are going to be getting a much safer and more reliable, more ethical, more sustainable service. But actually, a really key point is you are helping the future of Chinese herbal medicine too, because by being part of this community, you are joining and in this great effort to lay a great foundation for the future of the medicine. So, you know, there's that quote of ask not what country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Well, it's a little bit like that as well. So if you are considering herbal medicine, it's something that we would really, you know, something I would encourage you to join with all the people who are really earnestly trying to push things forward and have done for decades before us and laid the ground for us. But it's really great foundation for the future. I mean, a lot of people, you know, sometimes feel a bit despondent about Chinese medicine for the future, but after understanding all the things that have been achieved, all these continual connections, there are great opportunities waiting for us. If you, for example, you decide to practice herbal medicine outside of this, at the same by the same token, you're not getting those kinds of protections and benefits from practice, but also you're in an area where you know, the government is aware of people who practice outside of these higher standards voluntary regulating bodies, the more people who are in and doing and helping with this kind of positive drive for the future of the medicine, the more reassurance that gives to the government. So again, it really helps everybody and all your peers to come in and help. So in summary, really, I just wanted to say that bring it back to like my personal experience, my personal level. I've had a brilliant experience connecting up to the community of within the Register of Chinese Herbal Medicine. It's amazing what happens when we come together and all pitch in. And I think, you know, what was really great to see is through all the adversity through COVID, how we all came together and everyone actually supported each other through that. Within the RCHM, as I say, we had the Jade Screen project, which is an amazing project which galvanized everyone together. But more than that, you know, we all came together, the RCHM and the BXC. The RCHM and the BXC share 120 members. There's 120 dual members of both organizations because we all believe in good standards. We believe in putting the best face of our medicine forward. And I think that there's real scope for us to do even more in the future together. So there's really exciting things ahead. So, but with that, I'll pass on to Helen, who will be talking about the experience as a more recently qualified practitioner. Do you want to unmute, Helen? You still need to unmute, Helen. There we go.
Thank you. Thanks for that welcome, Alex. When I began my journey as a herbalist, I think that I was about 5 years of age. I used to mash up rose petals that I found on the floor in the garden. I was particularly aware that I didn't want to steal the ones that were growing beautifully. I picked them up and mash them up and then make a perfume for my mum. I'm sure lots of us did that. But there was something always very tangible about the world of plants for me that never quite left me. And I became an acupuncturist, always with that intention that I would study herbal medicine. I realised that that was actually unusual amongst my colleagues. And upon graduation from a barb accredited course, I graduated from the University of Salford, starting in 2005. And I was really hungry when I finished my acupuncture course, even though I'd had an amazing time and I got straight into practice and I was enjoying seeing patients. I knew that I would still want to do that. I wasn't quite sure when, but actually for me, what happened was going to be a few years later. I was at that time in my life, and I think it's really important to find the time in your life when it's right to study, because I spoke to a number of graduates from courses to hear about their experiences. As Connie has also reflected, it was a good idea to do. I spoke to people and said, how do I know? And they said, speak to graduates. So I did. I went to open days. And I literally, I know it might not be the way everybody would do it, but when I went to the open day, I felt very much at home at NCA, and I enjoyed speaking with the tutors there, and it was very accessible for me. So I reached a point in my life after I'd had children, and I could really invest the time. I knew that this was something I had to put some effort into. I knew it was something that was going to be really rich and rewarding for me, but I knew I had to fit it in with my life and my family life, and arrange that support. So to anybody thinking of doing this, of course, I'd be happy to speak with you, as I'm sure lots of graduates would. But I would say it's quite important, really, to find that time in your life where it feels right. I think you can probably see a picture of us all graduating there on our big happy day. We're all exhausted. Somebody said, is Chinese herbal medicine good for you? I would say yes, Chinese herbal medicine is great for you, but when you're studying it, I would say there were times when it was really, really hard, and the course was very testing, but there was not one part of it that was not necessary. I would say upon graduation, I was just ready, and they thought that I could have completed that course in any shorter time without that clinical training. It really isn't, it's just not possible. I very much spent my first year of practice. I'm not exactly out on my own. The RCHM has a new practitioner scheme, and that enables you to connect in with practitioners. It's like a phone a friend for a herbalist, and discuss cases. And there's only one way to learn herbs, and that's to do them. It is clinical training, and to have that support throughout my time at NCA, it was just invaluable. There is nothing like good teaching to help you come to those understandings for yourself, but your first year of practice I very much found that I had to apply those, and set up a reflective practice. I'd have a notebook where I would write down the things that bother me, the things that I didn't know, the things that I needed to look up, and I'm quite sure that Charlie will later tell you who made this quote, but it's very much a case for me. I'd go into work and I'd do my best for my patients, and I would come home and I would study. At the end of the day, I was still studying. And that's still very much the case for lifelong learning in herbal medicine. There's always something more that you could know. And I'm still hungry years after graduation for more learning and more clinical experience. So things that happened to me post-graduation is I immediately set up my own in-house pharmacy. I really enjoy running both a granule pharmacy and a raw herb pharmacy. And that was something that I just decided from the start that I might as well do. I really wanted to have both of those things in-house. And in the years since I've graduated, I've really learned that there are benefits both to the practitioner and to the patient of this. And I always thought that the reason that I would study Chinese herbal medicine was to get enhanced clinical results. I thought that maybe there was something that I would be able to add to my practice. Even though my acupuncture had been successful for many years, there were times when I hadn't been able to get quite the results I wanted, and I had referred on to another herbalist, and I wanted to be able to do that myself. So I did actually find upon graduation just some really stunning results with taking herbs, and I was most surprised to see how happy patients were to do that, even with raw herbs. We tend to think in the West that patients don't want to do that compliance with taking raw herbs, but it really isn't. It really wasn't true. I noticed that patients were happy with their prescriptions, and I noticed that there was a way to change the way that I was working in clinic. So where I may have been seeing a patient every week, I may be asking them to come back every 2 weeks, or maybe once the prescription is working, I could see them monthly. And this really created a space within the clinic to see a greater variety of patients. So that then started to really work for me. I was seeing a really enriching caseload coming through my clinic, and I found I had more time. I seemed to have more patients. My patients were doing well. My patients were happy. They were coming in and every week to see me, but they had herbs that they could take every day, you know, and this can be very helpful for busy patients. It can be very helpful for instance, for children who may not want to come into the clinic every day. And I was much surprised to learn that you can pop granules in a capsule and children can take them. It was lovely to see that I was reaching a different demographic than I would have done otherwise. Maybe patients that wouldn't have wanted acupuncture would come and take herbal medicine if they were put in a capsule. So I enjoy a good paediatric practice as well, which was actually a surprise to me. I didn't know that that would be quite so strong a part of my practice. And actually, it's what Alex said at the end there. I didn't realise how much I was enjoying being part of this current. I think that when you're plugged into something that's true, it reaches down into the roots and reaches up towards the branches and the flowers. And that current is something that really does flow through you when you're practicing authentic Chinese herbal medicine. It really does feel a very live practice. And the more that I studied and drew from the classics, the more I noticed that coming through me. And it made me ask the question, where will this go for me? And what will I bring to the medicine? I've put some pictures here of, I love dispensing raw herbs. I absolutely love it. It's very easy to dispense granules, and you can get those prescriptions out at the same time as you're treating your patient, maybe with acupuncture. So it's great convenience for patients. They can take the prescription when they're traveling. They can have different prescriptions for those of us that maybe see lots of fertility patients. It's super to actually give different prescriptions for different phases of the menstrual cycle. And that becomes really very accessible quite quickly when you're doing granules. So I learned to sculpt my treatment with acupuncture, with external herbal medicine and internal herbal medicine. And I really started to enjoy playing with that. And my patients would do that. I had a patient only yesterday. There he is. You very kindly agreed to share this picture. And I said, how do you feel about a foot bath? He said, oh, I'd love one. And just being able to offer that, his wife has foot baths and he's having a gout attack. So there he is, having his feet in a bowl of herbal medicine. He's taking internal herbs, but you know, when you get those messages that I love my foot bath, you really know that you're offering your patients something you couldn't do before. And I love being able to do that. It's also, it's quite a lot of fun, I think, when you're practicing herbs like this. Yeah, I think I mentioned before about the new practitioner scheme. There really is something in the sense of community in the RCHM that I enjoy being with. When I had an incident at my clinic where my library was lost due to a fire, a very generous act from the NCA supporting giving me textbooks, and Andrew Flower did as well. It's just such an incredibly warm and supportive community. We're not so big that you can get lost. You can't get lost in the RCHM. You know, we support each other, and because we're practitioners for practitioners, the council has a great way of doing that. I just wanted to very quickly share with you some of the kind of results that you can see. You could say, what does this do that acupuncture doesn't? And very briefly, there's a case of pustular psoriasis here that came to me in August, and the picture on the left that you see, this patient couldn't walk. She'd had it for 20 years and had broken a knee. She had had enough. And very rapidly, you can see within a matter of, it was actually within 4 weeks, she was much, much better, but you can see there's a very rapid progression of improvement here. And again, the same with another psoriasis patient who I tried to close my door on the last day of my practice at the winter solstice, but he said, please see me. And he sent me some photos and said, can you see me? And I thought, I can't let this chap go over Christmas. So that was one of those benefits of, I didn't want to see somebody in clinic a week later or 2 weeks later, but I could give herbs, and that gave me a flexibility to be able to treat. Here's this gentleman who I saw 2 weeks later, and that is what he looked like. his skin had started considerably to heal. And again, 2 weeks later, we're really seeing a huge transformation. And I know that this wouldn't have been possible without him taking internal herbs. This gentleman was completely keen to take raw herbs, didn't complain at all about the taste of them. I find that if you tell patients that they're going to taste shocking, then they only find good results come from that. And here he is quite recently, pretty much completely fine. For those of you that do fertility treatments, I've found that it can be incredibly helpful to use that in your fertility treatment planning. So if you're potentially seeing an implantation, as you would get a patient in the clinic to have acupuncture to support the luteal phase, for instance, you may be able to change or modify a formula. And I'm really sculpting with herbs. There's a real sense that that the herbs are very tangible and tactile, and that they have that quality. If you're thinking in a very detailed way about what it is you want to do, once you have that strategy that really comes from the training, you can then turn your ability to think about what the solution is for your patient and look at the problem that they're facing and get those results. And more recently, I decided maybe not to think what my country could do for me, but what I could do for my country. And I joined the RCHM Council a couple of years ago, which has been, I have to say, far more of a pleasure than I thought it would be. I enjoy working together with a really great bunch of people. You know, it'd be very easy to have a sense of imposter syndrome amongst some of the people that that we have in our profession, but I have to say there really is a great sense of welcoming, and I do look forward to going on to further study. The Jade Screen project was one of those wonderful surprises where Andrew Flower gathered together a group of herbalists, and we were able to help people, NHS and frontline workers. That's actually a picture of one of my Chinese herbal medicine formulas for actually live infection in COVID, that one. But we gave granules under that scheme. And one of the great things that I was able to offer to that was the suggestion that we created a tongue library. It was just one of those really can-do projects, and we really worked together as a bunch of herbalists to provide solutions facing outwards. I think all too often we know how great our medicine is, but from time to time we need to remember to turn this outward into the world. And that was one of those great initiatives at a time of need when we were able to do that. So just to say, I would really welcome anybody who wanted to study reaching out to me or any of my colleagues that graduated on my course. I know they would be happy to speak with you, but I now look forward to further study, actually, and I go back into the classic texts, and I still find that richness there that inspires me today. In the simplicity, there's this depth, and I'm amazed that that our lineage actually knew that, and it becomes more and more beautiful the more I practice and the more I study. So I would encourage anybody who was thinking about studying Chinese herbal medicine to know that they will never ever be bored. It's just not possible. This is a wonderful practice for your lifetime. I'd also like to say a brief thank you to the patients who shared their images for the talk. And I'd like to hand you over now to Charlie, who's been doing this, I think it's fair to say, a number of years more than most of us, and has a few things to say about what the path looks like when you're working really towards that level of mastery.
I'm Charles Buck. I've been immersed in this profession for about 42 years as a practitioner, educator, and as a student. And in this short session today, I want to give you some kind of insight into what Chinese herbal medicine is about. I want to try and give you some idea of what you get when part of out of studying this. And just to talk a little bit for a few minutes about myself. I started my journey into Chinese herbal medicine when I was a student, an acupuncture student at ICON in the early 1980s. And I sort of stumbled into hearing about Chinese herbs, which were kind of unknown at that time. The word Chinese herbs never appeared in the acupuncture college at that time. And this was a time when Chinese herbal medicine in the UK only really existed in Chinatowns in London and Manchester, and I think there was also a Vietnamese practitioner in Birmingham, and they existed just to serve the Chinese community. Westerners didn't go in these places; it was too weird. It was too weird for people, and I once went in to the one Chinese herb pharmacy in Manchester, and the first thing they said was, "Oh, the supermarket's on the other side of the road." Like I'd walked in by mistake. Luckily, I got a friend who had made all the herb drawers for them. He was a carpenter, and he'd made all the herb drawers, and so he gave me an introduction at that time in about 1984. Which allowed me to buy actually buy the herbs, because there were no importers at that time. And later on, of course, I realized that I wasn't the only person doing this. Around the same time, we've got Giovanni, we've got Richard Blackwell, we've got Michael McIntyre, Marzine, and a few others who stumbled into this whole new world beyond acupuncture. But I don't think that anybody at that time really knew how much our understanding of Chinese medicine would be transformed. It just seemed like an exotic sideline. We'd no idea of the world of what we were getting into, really. And then Giovanni managed to persuade Ted Kapchuk, who was a hero at that time and was a particular hero of mine, to come over from the US to teach Chinese herbal medicine in a series of seminars over 2 years. And that was really the birth date of Chinese herbal medicine in the UK. And then I think in 1987, we started to get a Chinese herbal importer into the UK, and we've kind of grown from there. About 1990, or in 1990, I completed a clinical internship in Shanghai, and the college there and in the hospitals there. And partly as a result of being one of the few people who'd done that sort of thing, in 1994, I was invited by Hugh and Richard at the Northern College to head their new herb course. And this was the first UK college-based Chinese herb training that had a full curriculum, shall we say, that had formal assessment procedures with exam boards and what have you, with a dedicated teaching clinic and with a full curriculum. And I didn't do this by myself. We also had Sarah Price teaching. We had Chung Hao Zhou running the clinical teaching, and we had Han Li Ping from Beijing. And I taught on this for about 20 years, and later saw the course accredited as a master's degree. So this was an amazing trajectory from, in really the space of 10 years, from something being really quite unknown to suddenly we've got formal, accredited, good quality courses. And so I was so excited by this. I put my heart and soul into it, and the students loved it without exception. We had no dropouts because people were unhappy. People were just excited to join this journey. And things grew exponentially from there. The RCHM membership went from about 12 in 1986, I think that was, through to about 400 in a very short space of time, in a few years. And the wholesalers started to pile in as well, importers of Chinese herbs. And we ended up with about 6 or 7 wholesale importers, all competing with each other for our business, which was good. But in the 1980s, towards the late 80s, the biggest application for my Chinese herbs was for my fertility practice. And the wisdom in China was that Chinese herbs were really the main treatment for fertility issues. And so I took that at face value and used Chinese herbs predominantly for that. And the outcomes were often remarkable. So I started off really focusing on fertility, but then we got to about 1991, 92. And the Great Ormond Street Hospital pediatric department started using Chinese herbs or doing clinical trials of Chinese herbs for children with eczema. And this really exploded. They published a trial in the BMJ of Chinese herbs for pediatric eczema with about over 1,000 children in it. So this was a very exciting clinical trial to have that in the BMJ. And suddenly my practice exploded with dermatology work. So I had to go and study with a Chinese dermatologist called Professor Lin from Beijing. And I had to also learn my Western medicine dermatology, which is very exciting, just looking at these books of horrible bits of skin diseases and learning the names of them and learning how to identify them. At that time, I was prescribing between 3 and 5 tons of Chinese herbs, whole Chinese herbs a year. And this was mostly for skin conditions. And I should say that I had no significant adverse reactions. I had some people with a tummy ache or a bit of loose bowels or what have you, but this was year after year, 3 to 5 tons of Chinese herbs being prescribed safely with no adverse reactions and no problems at all. So, but since our inception as a profession in this UK, in the UK as a new profession, we've had this big problem that's remained with us, just haunting us all this time. And this is the problem of helping people to understand what actually you get, what makes this medicine so important, and what makes this medicine such an important contribution to healthcare in the Western world. And this is something that's quite difficult to articulate. Most people can't see it. And so we've got work to do to educate the public and the legislators to understand, as we know in acupuncture, that's difficult to explain too, and Chinese medicine, Chinese herbal medicine, and in fact, the whole traditional East Asian medicine tradition. And, even many acupuncturists don't quite get it. They don't quite see what it is that is so important about Chinese herb study. They can't see what you gain from it. And this is an issue that has been formally identified in the field of cognitive science research. And in cognitive linguistics, this is called the curse of knowledge. This is the issue that the more you know about a subject, the more difficult it becomes, the harder it gets to communicate with others what your industry is around, or what your profession is about, or what your subject is about. And Sun Si Miao, I think we have a slide coming up. Sun Si Miao, perhaps his most famous saying ever. I hope we're able to put the slide up. Has the slide gone up? Sun Si Miao slide. Good. Sun Si Miao, who was one of the most astounding doctors of Chinese medicine history, was famous for saying something a little bit gnomic, a little bit odd. Sun Si Miao said, "Medicine is yi," and that's the same yi as the yi of the spleen. So it means a whole load of things: thought, intention, reflection, attention. It means a whole load of different things. But actually, Volker Schieder, who's obviously a hero of mine and who studied Chinese herbs at the same time as me with Ted Kapcho, Volker translated this as medicine is a way of thinking. And I think the next slide shows that medicine is a way of thinking, which is quite interesting, really, because it raises the question, what the hell do you mean by that? What do you mean medicine is a way of thinking? So it's taken a little bit. My job today is to try and explain what that means, what the way of thinking that we gain with Chinese medicine is. So we can finish that slide and have my, oh, no, not that one. No, stop that. Me, I want a picture of me. That's better. So yes, medicine is yi. How do we understand that? How do we understand what that means? What's that supposed to mean? Well, we could kind of explain it by saying, well, we could say science is a way of thinking. And that would be true too, wouldn't it? Science is a way of thinking, because if you asked a scientist what the way of thinking is, they would say, well, science is about the rational investigation of nature. Science raises questions and hypotheses, which it then tests using its formalistic methods. And you could say the way of thinking of a scientist can be defined. And what we find almost in contrast to that is that we can say similar things about the way of thinking of Chinese medicine. So what Sun Si Miao meant was that skilled physicians of this medical tradition, train their minds to be perceptive. That's to say that they're using all their cognitive skills to understand the world and to understand their patients. And they're also, the way of thinking is to do with identifying patterns, taking the complexity of the human body, taking the complexities of nature, and learning to be able to intervene in that in a way that's strategic. And if I just said to you, Chinese medicine is very strategic, you know, that would be the curse of knowledge. You would go, what do you mean? It's really strategic. It goes whoop over your head if you're not careful. So really, what I want to try and explain today is what that thing is, what that strategy is, what you gain by understanding, by studying and understanding Chinese medicine. What is the way of thinking that underlies this medicine? Because if you learn the subject and if you learn Chinese herbal medicine, you begin to appreciate, you begin to glimpse the strategic genius that lies behind the classical tradition. You learn its thinking methods in a way that you struggle to get by studying acupuncture. You get the opportunity to peer directly into the minds of brilliant thinkers, the brilliant geniuses behind this medicine. You learn classical medicine thinking because you can look at what these people did and you've got the language to understand what they were doing and why it makes sense. So it gives you a way to plug into the tradition that's hard to explain if you've never been through that. It's only when you've been through that process, as Helen has, and everyone here has, or everyone in the RCHM has, that you end up in a place that is difficult to explain to others, but is deeply touching and gives you a deep connectedness with the tradition. So when we peer into the minds behind this medicine, we see that it really is strategic, that there's really something very, very clever and very subtle about the way that the Chinese designed their medicine to work. There's a deep sense of strategy at the very heart of this medicine. But if I say that without illustrating it, you can't understand that. So it's just words, isn't it? So what I want to try and do is to just go through a very specific situation that might give you an inkling into what it's about. And one really common narrative in clinical practice that I've seen countless times is this situation where a person gets a chest infection and then they go along to their GP who prescribes antibiotics. And that's because the GP has got a really simple kind of loop going on. Some bugs have got into your lungs, they're starting a family, and it's giving you this problem. So if we give you something that will kill the bugs, that's it, isn't it? So, and in actual fact, when we look at this, we find that very often those people seem to recover for a couple of weeks, and then it comes back again. And then they go back to the GP, oh, you've got an infection again, have some more antibiotics. And then after repeating that a few times, the patient is then sent off to a specialist who then says, oh, well, you've got chronic bronchitic asthma, you need an inhaler, you need steroids. And those people, I've seen them after 20 years of 20 years of unresolved chest infection that is, and where they're getting osteoporosis from the steroids and what have you. And this is a common situation. And the strange thing is that when we look at evidence-based medicine, and let's just have the next slide, when we look at evidence-based medicine, we find that the evidence doesn't support the use of antibiotics for chest infections. On the left here, this is a screenshot from the NNT, the number needed to treat website, which is trying to cut through all the statistical nonsense in medicine and just give a proper assessment of what works for different things. And if you can read it, it says basically there's no NNT for antibiotics in chest infections because it has no value whatsoever. Then you might say, well, okay, but that's because of antibiotic resistance. But I found a paper in 1993 that said exactly the same thing. It said, an evaluation of the current literature does not support antibiotic treatment for acute bronchitis. So we've got this issue of that very simplistic approach of bugs in lungs, kill bugs, you'll get better. not really adding up very well. So we can cut the slide now and have me again. Good. So this isn't an uncommon situation, and I'm just picking this just as a way of illustrating what is different about the Chinese doctor's approach. So we can see that the antibiotic approach ignores the wider problem. It's not very strategic. It's a simple kill bugs kind of thing. But nobody looks there at the wider pattern of change. So giving antibiotics is just not strategic. By focusing on the bug, it just ignores all the other things that are happening in that patient. It doesn't address the whole pattern. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on. So those bugs will trigger an inflammatory response in the bronchi. And the body's response to that inflammation is to spasm the bronchial muscles. So you start wheezing, you get tightness, because the inflammation is cramping up the lungs. The mucus glands in the bronchi start to pump out more gloop, more thick mucus. And this thick stuff accumulates in the lungs. And because it's so viscous, the cilia that would normally be transporting thin, slippery mucus out can't move it anymore. And there's been studies of those cilia. I always used to imagine when I was a physiology student that they were like hula hoop girls, you know, kind of woo-doo. And then I found that the research shows that they, in health, they operate at something like 6,000 vibrations a minute. So they're going like this inside us all the time, cleaning us out. But what they found was that when you get infection set in, the thickness of the mucus cuts down that vibration down to something like 300 wafts a minute. So that thick gloop massively inhibits the ability of the lungs to clear themselves. So the mucus begins to clog up, it begins to stagnate in there. It allows other infections to get in. And although you might cough it up, those mucus glands are just producing more and more mucus. And eventually it'll get so thick and rubbery, you can't cough it up anymore. You know, and those people will cough up casts from their lungs, actual casts of their bronchial tree made of rubber almost. And that's the antibiotics don't cover that. So basically, this is a mess that killing bugs doesn't really address. But in Chinese medicine terms, we see that if we look at the prescription, the cunning prescription that was invented, there was a prescription called Ding Chuan Tang that was, which means stop dyspnea soup, is a classic prescription for chronic bronchitis that was written in about 1410, and it addresses all the issues that go wrong in this in a joined-up way. So from a pharmacology point of view, it's got a herb in there that is a powerful bronchodilator that counters the spasm in the lungs. It has substances that have quite good antibiotic effects. So it's still killing bugs, but it's doing a lot of other stuff too. It has things in there that are anti-inflammatory, that help take the inflammation out of the lung tissue, so that you're dealing with the root of the spasm. It's got herbs that slow down the production of mucus. There are herbs there that turn off the excess secretion of mucus by the goblet cells. And then there are some herbs in there that help the cilia, help activate the cilia, so they push stuff out. That is genius, because it's taking the whole situation, all the things that have gone wrong, not just the bugs, but the body's responses, and strategically addressing all of them. Now, that's genius. You know, I think that's really brilliant. And we could pick 100 prescriptions from Chinese medicine history and analyze them in a similar way, and just get a glimpse on you think, how did these people do it? You get a glimpse on their genius, and you think, how the hell did they work this out? I don't know, they were very clever. So I'm talking in pharmacology terms here. And obviously when you study Chinese herbal medicine, we don't really think in these terms. We think in the traditional diagnostic terms of resolving phlegm, disseminating lung qi, and all those things. So although I'm talking in pharmacology terms, I'm only doing that because I can tell you that pharmacology has been done. I can say that the herb Sangbaipei has powerful anti-inflammatory effects on the lungs, because there is pharmacology that's done it. But we learn, when we learn the subject, that we don't really learn that. We learn the traditional approach, clearing lung heat, resolving phlegm, dispersing the lung chi, or what have you. So that's one classic formula that gives you an insight, perhaps, into exactly what you get when you study this medicine. Now, if you looked back at a historical acupuncture prescription, and you say, oh, they did stomach 36 and liver 3 and colon 4, you wouldn't really be peering into the mind, into the thinking, the strategic thinking. You wouldn't be able to picture the patient very well from a list of acupuncture points. Maybe with some you could, but it doesn't have the sharp focus. It doesn't give you the actual direct contact with what the physician of history was thinking. And that's really touching to be able to do. That's to me what you get out of the study of Chinese herbal medicine, is that you really get a much deeper insight into the strategies and the thinking of the historical tradition. So this, I think, is a really important path to genuine understanding of the tradition, that if you only study acupuncture, you never really get. You never quite get. Okay, there's lots of classical stuff, and there's things that acupuncture can do that Chinese herbal medicine can't do. There's lots of things like that, and there's many things that acupuncture is a better treatment for. And also Chinese herbal medicine study isn't for everybody, but for those who really want the joy, the deep sense of joy of connecting with this 2,000-year tradition and connecting with the minds of these people, the effort and commitment and cost involved are small compared to the rewards you get for your life experience. You know, even if herbs were completely banned, which isn't on the cards, but even if they were completely banned, you would still benefit from the thinking, the underlying way of thinking that Sun Si Miao was talking about in your whole life and in your whole practice anyway. So for people who step through this door, it can be a revelation and a way of connecting very deeply with the tradition. So I sound like I'm trying to sell something, but I'm not. I'm just passionate about having been through that, stepped through that door of Chinese medicine, and to have discovered something. And maybe I'm like a Jehovah's Witness on your doorstep. I've had some kind of salvation or some realization, and I would love more people, more colleagues and more professional colleagues and friends to have the same experience, and to discover the wisdom, experience and strategy that is this medicine. So thank you for listening this far, and I'll sign you over to Alex to finish off. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Charlie. I really resonate with what you're saying. It's funny because sometimes you get asked, does Chinese medicine treat COVID, or does Chinese medicine treat epidemics? And the funny thing is that the most significant advances in the medicine, the most significant text, the core text, are all about treating epidemics. So it's not just can it treat epidemics? That's the main thing it does, you know. And as you say, like describing these different scenarios, different strategies, and things like that. Which I always found it amazing that you can pick up a book like the Shanghan Lun, which is 2,000 years old. It describes a patient. Very, you know, and it says, you know, if the patient's, this is happening with the patient, give them this, and you have someone come to your door 2,000 years later, precisely the same situation, you give them the same formula and they get better. It's just, how amazing is it to have a dialogue with a human being 2,000 years ago, you know, and you know, people at a certain level don't change that much in 2,000 years, you know, probably change a bit, but not that much. So it's really fantastic. So anyway, with that, thank you everyone for being here today. We're going to open up for a Q&A. You feel free to ask us absolutely anything about any aspect of herbal medicine, study, practice, practicalities, anything that's that you know you're curious of, or questions you've always wanted to have asked, and we'll be happy to answer. So if you like, you can either put something in the chat, we can read it out, or you could unmute and ask question that way.
I can see Virginia.
Hello. Oh, yeah. So I'll lower my hand.
Hi,
And,
Virginia.
hi, I am attending from North Carolina in the USA, and I studied acupuncture at the College of Traditional Chinese Medicine quite a long time ago, and wasn't in the UK long enough to do the herbal course that was offered there at the time. I did start the first year, but had to come back to the US before I was able to finish it. So I've always been interested in wanting to study Chinese herbs. And you're probably wondering why I haven't done it here in the US. But anyway, I'm a little bit curious now with all of the advances in the technology and so forth, if the structure of the courses that are offered by, in the UK, if they are offered in person exclusively or virtually, or in a hybrid format, and if there's any possibility for being able to participate in one of these courses, given that I am not in the UK.
You want to answer that one, Connie?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Hi, Virginia, and thanks. It's a really good question,
Hi.
actually, because obviously that is part of the logistics of studying, and a lot of people we know are busy with their practices and busy with their lives in general, find it hard to to fit in traveling, etc. So certainly what changed with COVID, one of the very positive things that came out of COVID is that a lot of courses have moved a significant component online as much as possible. So certainly our courses have moved all the theory online, and they have worked at creating a clinical experience that will be online as well. So the best thing for you to do would be to contact the courses directly to find out all the details.
Okay.
But certainly they are trying to accommodate as much as possible people who have a certain distance to travel. Obviously, you might have to look at time differences if you
Oh yes,
logging on from the
absolutely.
US,
That's
but
true.
I mean, there are things
Yeah.
to look into. I would say, yes, do contact the courses directly to find the details, but I know they are very open at trying to, to make it accessible to people who have difficulties with traveling. Yes.
Well, I appreciate that, because you addressed the issue of cost, and the cost here in the US is much higher than it is in the UK. There's actually a program that's a hybrid program that's not too far away from where I live, but it's about $16,000 a year, and it's a 2.5 year program, which makes it really difficult. So I'm trying to find, alternatives that are a little bit more affordable. So thank you, and thank you for the introduction today to what you've got to offer. Appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
I think it's important to say that one of the things that the RCHM is doing is where there are courses that meet the criteria of the high standards that we expect, that have that clinical component, those courses could come online at some point in the future, and we'll always consider those flexible methods of working to make it possible. I know that my course wouldn't have been possible without some degree of flexibility, and colleges really are aware of that.
Oh, sorry, did you hear that? Yeah, sorry, and there is overseas membership of the RCHM as well. So that's also a possibility. I think Bruce had his hand up, and then Fiona after that. So Bruce first.
Hi, everybody. I can actually answer that question because I'm at NCA at the moment. And it's entirely online, apart from the initial weekend of each year. So it's a 2-year course, which is a diploma, and you can actually go on to do an MSc, which I am doing. So the clinic is entirely online, and all the lectures are online. They get you together so you can meet the group at the beginning of the first and the second years. So if you could come over to the UK for those initial weekends, that'd be great, but I'm sure there would be a way around that. Yeah, and it sounds like it's a lot cheaper than the US from what you've just said. So yeah.
And I think the other issue for me is just because I did do my initial education and kind of clinical training in the UK, and then I did return to the UK and practice there for another 4 years. I studied with Julian Scott, and just my connections are with all of the tradition, the history of Chinese medicine in the UK, and so it just seems logical for me. Although I am practicing here, I'm just not that connected with the programs here, and yeah, so I appreciate the technology opening up possibilities.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Bruce, for confirming that. That's great. Good to have that. Fiona, would you like to ask your question?
I was going to fill in about NCA being online every Sunday for term time, and I believe the other course at White Crane is totally online as well. So that's what I was going to butt in with, but I want to start herbs in October, and I just don't know which college to go to. So yeah, I was just sort of those are the two colleges that are recommended, or have got the level of education that you can get into your regulating body.
There are current 2 accredited courses, and it's a little bit difficult for us to recommend one over the other.
No.
They're both excellent courses, and both of them have had some really good feedback. I've spoken to graduates from both who are, the feedback was consistently excellent. So in a way, if, for you to choose would be a matter of, getting in touch with them, maybe attending some, some open days, open lectures, and just see what feeling you get and which one you gel with more. It becomes a personal choice at that stage.
Yeah, I think it's NCA that only does the masters though. I think.
They do the 2-year postgraduate diploma as well.
Yeah, but I don't think White Crane do the masters.
Oh, I see. Yeah, if you want to do a master's, that's correct. Yes, they do. That's the NCA only. White Crane doesn't do that. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to let everyone know, you're always welcome just to contact us if you've got any questions, or you want to discuss things. We're always really happy to talk about pathways in. You can drop a line to, I'm just going to put it in the chat, office@rchm.co.uk with any kind of queries. You can also ask to speak to me, to Alex, if you like. I'm very happy to have a chat with you. I'll also say that we've got a mailing list for everyone, so it's not just members. There's a universal mailing list, so if you'd like to be put on that mailing list, and we give some free articles from our journal, we give some discounts on CPD events and stuff like that for everybody, even not just members of the RCHM. So if you'd like to be on that mailing list, you can just drop your name and email into the chat, and I'll make sure you get put on it. Or if you're watching this video later, you can just email us to ask to be put on at office@rchm.co.uk.
I quickly had another question about the 2 courses that are accredited and the number of clinical hours that they each, I imagine that you have a minimum standard of clinical training in order to accredit a course, and I'm just curious what that level is.
The minimum is 600 hours. Yeah, okay. So that's what they both have. Which,
excellent, thank you.
As I mentioned, yes, is a significant number of hours, but that we believe that is what's really necessary to fully, just get used to the practice of the herbs, understand the formulas, see them in different contexts. Yeah,
I mean,
that's
what I would say is, so one of the things we didn't mention is we have a new practitioner scheme in the RCHM. So once you graduate and you come into the RCHM, we have a 2-year program where you get mentored by more experienced practitioners to ease you into practice, and that's all aspects of practice you might
Helen mentioned it. She called it the Foley Friends.
Sorry, we did mention it. But anyway,
herbalist.
Sorry, I had to mention it. But one thing I'd say is that I've been a mentor on one of those programs, and so I've got to know some of the graduates. And one of the things that comes out of it is that they tell me about the level of teaching in the clinical hours, and both of these courses put such a lot of emphasis on really trying to enable people to have those skills through not just plain having clinical hours, but using them in a way where the discussions are very, very interactive to really get people to up to this kind of high supported level. And I know that's your experience, wasn't it, Helen? You're muted.
Absolutely. I can remember one session when a patient didn't turn up because of the weather or the car broke down, and that patient had X condition, and we went to every single patient who had that condition in the patient files and discussed it. We were working out. We were sent away to think about it, come up with different strategies for this patient. At the end of that session, we'd done equally as much work as we would have done if the patient would have been in. The clinics were absolutely they were hothouses of clinical genius. I could not thank Cheng Zhenghao and Eileen for their support in really bringing that skill on. What is in the textbooks does not come alive until the patient's in front of you. And I loved clinic, actually. I really loved the clinical practice that I had. I can see that there's a question in the chat about the familiarity of language that you would be expected to have to get the most out of a course. I may offer my answer to that, which is my knowledge of Chinese is really very, very minimal. I know there's people here that have far higher, but it's not necessary. I can highly recommend Sabine Wilms and her work for looking into the Chinese language, and there's a whole level of depth that gives to practice should you do that, but it wouldn't be necessary is my answer. What would be necessary, obviously, I'm assuming amongst all of us here, we are BAB trained practitioners, that initial degree is essential, but there is no need for the Chinese language.
I just one point on that. I am planning to do some pronunciation lessons. So I speak Mandarin Chinese, and I was planning to do some pronunciation lessons so you can pronounce the herbs. So I was going to do that for free for all the RCHM members and push it out to the students as well. And that will be a student resource. So another that will go to anyone who's doing one of our accredited courses. You'll get some free seminars on Chinese pronunciation. So yeah, you need to learn herb names, and it's helpful to learn things like, for example, twig or root or things like that, because then you know what part of the plant